Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining Blockchain UBC's August monthly research talk. Today, we have Ryon Shamloo from the Cedric Foundation to present his work on blockchain forensics. And before I start to introduce Ryon to you, I would like to thank Dr. David Wen for introducing Ryon to Blockchain UBC. It was Dr. David Wen that told us that Ryon is doing some fantastic work with blockchain forensics. So a big thank you to Dr. Wen for making this wonderful talk happen. So now let me introduce Ryon Shamloo to everyone here. So Ryon is a decentralized finance and security professional working on protecting users and protocols of the Celo blockchain. Ryon has a deep passion for and practical experience in blockchain forensics due to his extreme involvement in the DeFi space. Ryon started his professional career at a security consultancy firm, providing security compliance auditing services for various Fortune 500 companies. Prior to this, he obtained a degree in information security from California Pomona. At a young age, Ryon was inseparable from his computer screen and grew up both in the physical and virtual world. Ryon was introduced to hacking and offensive security in his teenager years through online communities. Eventually, having a close eye to this industry led to his discovery of Bitcoin in 2013. After seeing the injustices and malicious behavior perpetuated by crypto anarchists, he became enamored with defending the less fortunate and made a personal commitment to bring light where there's endless darkness. So on that note, I will pass it on to Ryon. And Ryon, please take over from here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Doctor. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. He gave a really good introduction, but I'll just summarize it again. So my name is Ryon Shamloo. I'm a DeFi security analyst and researcher at Celo. But just letting you know, everything in this presentation is my personal views and is not for a reflection on my organization. So the topic will be DeFi investigations and preventing criminal activity. I think this is a very relevant topic, especially with recent events that have happened in the ecosystem. So moving forward here, just like a quick introduction, a little like PowerPoint slide of it. So yeah, I currently work DeFi security at Celo. Previously, I was doing information security consulting and auditing. I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona with a degree in information security. Fun fact, I love making horrible memes. So when you see bad memes in this presentation, just know. And one of my favorite quotes is "The ends justify the means" by Niccolo Machiavelli. So there's this recipe for disaster. So what happens when you mix the anonymity of the internet, potential greed of financial markets, and a maturing coding infrastructure? You get a potential PvP free-for-all, and this is like, player versus player. So this would be two different DeFi users going head-to-head at it. And you have, if you look at here, you have the Powerpuff Girls analogy, where there's decentralization, censorship resistance, and financial opportunity. These are all great things, but then you add a bad mix of degenerates, which unfortunately happen to be a big majority of the people who like to participate in the DeFi space. And I'm no different, sadly. So these are the ingredients broken down a little more in depth. So we have the anonymity, greed, and insecure code from a maturing coding infrastructure. So anonymity is kind of like a false mask that a lot of people on the internet, I'm sure you've all seen, gives them this confidence that they normally would not have because there's no consequences to their actions, or seemingly isn't. So this has been scientifically studied and has been proven through a concept called de-individuation. And this is studied heavily in 1969 by Philip G. Zimbardo. This also relates to a very famous case done in Stanford, and I believe maybe Harvard, where they had students pretend to be prisoners and some pretending to be, the officers of the prison. And it showed, once you give someone a little bit more anonymity and a little power, they abuse it. So when it comes to greed, a lot of people go into DeFi thinking, oh, I just want to make a lot of money. I see, like, goes to the moon. I'm going to be rich. And that couldn't be further from the truth of like what it's meant to be. But unfortunately, in a space where we don't necessarily have direct impact on the narrative of things, it just kind of goes where the majority of people want it to go. So currently there's a lot of greed, and this is no different than, traditional financial markets, whether it be the stock market or, like loans, things of this sort. Greed just kind of goes hand in hand with money. That's always going to be a thing in life, and we just kind of have to accept that. So where it kind of becomes a problem is you add this insecure coding element to it. I'm sure you've all seen plenty of bridges being hacked, and different things are just millions and millions of dollars being stolen. The total counts up to like 7 billion now. So that's a pretty surmountable amount of money. And it's just because it's such a new industry. It's barely been over a decade that this industry has even been around, let alone Ethereum and EVM, even shorter than that. So, to catch these criminals, we kind of have to think of how they would exploit systems. So you kind of have to put on your little like white hat hacker hat and think, okay, like how would they do this? How could they go about exploiting these systems? And once we know how they can do it, we can figure out how to prevent it. So just reiterating that this is for educational purposes only. I'm not teaching anyone here how to launder money or do anything illegal. It's just for strictly educational purposes only. So I just want to reiterate that. So moving forward, this is hypothetical of how laundering could work. So we have mixers, bridges, obfuscated smart contracts, known as like black box contracts, non-KYC exchanges, and privacy coins like Monero. So to start off, I'll talk about Tornado.Cash, which is, I think, very relevant. It's one of the most prominent mixers on the EVM chains. It spans across almost every single major chain, layer ones and layer twos alike. Essentially what this does is it breaks the chain of custody and the traceability between the depositor and the withdrawer. And like a typical mixer, it just makes it almost impossible to trace down who initially put this money in and who's taking it out. If done properly, there are ways to screw this up, and there has been multiple occasions where law enforcement has been able to, find out who these people are through their improper usage of the protocol. A quote from the website itself, it's self-proclaimed a fully decentralized protocol for private transactions on Ethereum. So very relevant update, as of yesterday, OFAC has sanctioned Tornado.Cash. So the US Treasury Department, especially related to APTs and with the Ryon bridge hack and other situations that have happened in recent history, they wanted to prevent money laundering and the Bank Secrecy Act of funding terrorism and malicious, threat actors. So as of yesterday, this is something that's being heavily watched, and now a lot of people are kind of on the fence on what to do. It's potentially even a crime to, interact with the contract. So a lot of people are on edge about that, and something to keep in mind. So here are just some quick statistics of Tornado.Cash, and just shows you the breadth of how large this all is. So roughly 3.4 million Ethereum has been deposited. Obviously, the price of that varies, but it's a lot of money. Over 37,500 new users, just not a small number, considering most people who do deposit into this have to deposit a surmountable amount to be able to retain privacy. And yeah, over 144,000 deposits. You can see, especially in the middle of 2020 to the end is when Tornado.Cash really started taking off, and it's just been extremely high volume since then. It's a go-to for a lot of hackers and people exploiting protocols to hide their money. So it's just a quick idea of what the depositing screen looks like. You can see you can choose different amounts to deposit to increase the anonymity. You can see the amount of people that have deposited equal amounts. So obviously, the more people that deposit the same amount of money, the harder it is to trace who deposited that and who's withdrawing it. And then this is also the withdrawing interface. You can withdraw, basically you get like a note when you deposit, and no one else can see this note. And whenever you put back this note, you can withdraw the funds to any address. Even if it doesn't have gas, you can use a relayer and it'll deduct the gas fees from it. So there's truly no way to even know how it was funded. Moving forward, a lot of things like bridges are used to make it even harder to trace these crimes. So multi-chain being one of the biggest by total value locked, spans across multiple different EVM chains, and it's almost integral to the DeFi space at this very moment. There are more bridges that are, taking up more of that dominance, but at the moment, the largest is multi-chain. So a lot of these crimes are using multi-chain. So they'll move funds through these bridges to different EVM chains. And what makes it kind of difficult to trace these is our tooling infrastructure is still relatively new. And while we can trace a lot of things on the same chain really effectively, it's once you go cross-chain, you have to kind of segment your tracing to be able to reflect that difference. So another issue we have is obfuscated contracts. So a lot of people who are, I guess, a little bit more medium to advanced in the DeFi space learn to interact with contracts directly. Instead of using a front end built by someone, you can directly go to a block explorer, write to the contract, and do whatever you need to do. In the hypothetical case that the front end gets taken down, the website gets shut down, anything like that. So there's always that ability to interact with it, even though what it's being hosted by might no longer be available. So for these to be interactable through these block explorers, they have to be verified. And a lot of these, specifically through Etherscan, is one of the most commonly used block explorers, and allows you to verify these contracts. And thus, once they're verified, people can use the API to interact with these contracts. And essentially, anyone who deploys a contract, it's almost impossible for someone to truly interact with it, and knowing the function variables and whatnot, simply because it's just a bunch of bytecode. And if you go to decompile it without verifying it, it'll be very hard to really understand what's going on and really cumbersome. So a lot of malicious contracts typically operate in this black box state where you can't read what is actually going on. And that's by design. So we also have non-KYC exchanges, KYC being you know your customer. This is very in line with AML, anti-money laundering. So a few notable exchanges, but not necessarily saying they're bad or they're facilitating anything. It's just that big names that people might know would be KuCoin, BMix. There's a decentralized exchange that's also using the Binance Cloud, such as Felix. And we have these kind of off-chain third-party swaps, such as Changelly, ChangeNow, and ChangeAngel. So essentially, KYC is not meant to be fully to prevent crimes. It's mostly to just know the risk factors of someone using the platform. AML is where, it's anti-money laundering in the name itself. It's to prevent money laundering and funding terrorism. So a lot of people are kind of turned off by KYC, but in reality, AML is the more stringent and more deeply rooted into like legal issues. One of the biggest reasons that people are able to get away with money laundering and these crimes is using privacy coins such as Monero. Monero is one of the most commonly used in the dark web at the moment. It's overtaken what Bitcoin used to be mostly used in the dark web, but now it's all XMR or Monero, simply because of the cryptography and encryption methodologies that are used. It's pretty impossible to trace it. There has been some claims that people have been able to, but they've all been debunked. And honestly, for it to be cracked would be something that I truly believe would cause bigger issues than just in the crypto space. So yes, while it exists, it does kind of give this ability for people to have pure privacy on chain, which you can't trace these transactions at all. You truly can't tell who initiated the transaction. You can't tell who actually received it fully either. So it's very confusing if you were to read the block explorer, and that's by design. It's meant to be fully privacy retentive. So they use ring signatures, which then turn into ring CTs, which are just another iteration of ring signatures. And now the newest implementation of privacy that Monero uses is the bullet proofs, which is also a type of cryptographic signature. So this is more of like a technical breakdown of it. You can see the mathematical sense of how this cryptography works, and a little bit of breaking down of like these Schnorr signatures, the ring CT and bulletproofs. There's also a graphical display of how this kind of works. So in the concept of ring signatures, you have one person is truly doing the transaction, sending it to another person, but you obfuscate it with a bunch of other people's keys, and there's a lot of dummy keys and fake keys that make it, harder to even trace. And sometimes they throw you in the wrong direction on purpose. And this could lead to kind of an endless possibility of different routes that this money could have taken, thus making it almost impossible to trace. So let's look at like the evil in practice. How do people actually do this? How do they get away with this? So I've made a few diagrams of hypothetical processes and how these things could go down. So in a hypothetical process at a high level, we have what I like to call the obfuscation loop. And it's not necessarily like a closed loop. It's pretty open-ended, but for explanation's sake, you just create a bunch of burner wallets. And once you have the stolen funds, you can just transfer them all throughout these different wallets in differing amounts. And any tracing tool typically is going to give you a pretty crazy outlook of what this looks like, because it's pointing to a bunch of different wallets. And the whole point of this is just to obfuscate it. It's not truly hiding where the money is. It's just making it fork off into a bunch of different paths, increasing the manpower needed to actually identify where these funds are going, if you're not fully using like data analysis and AI. So from here, what they would do typically is bridge a portion, if not all the funds, to a separate chain. They could split into 2 different chains, 3, 4, as many as they want, using bridges such as multi-chain. And from these bridges, it's kind of up to them what they want to do. I think the most effective thing that can be done is sending it to a non-EVM chain, because once you separate that boundary, it's kind of hard to trace a non-EVM chain with a EVM tool. So you kind of have to use multiple different tools, and jumbling them together, once again, increases the amount of manpower needed to do this in an effective amount of time. So from here, typically it'll be bridged back to Ethereum or another high volume chain that uses Tornado.Cash. And they would deposit this Ethereum into Tornado.Cash, receive the cryptographic note they need to withdraw the money eventually, and they'll wait a significant amount of time. The longer they wait, the more anonymous it truly is. So days, if not months. Typically, there's some people who have deposited that have been there for over a year, and we're just kind of waiting for that money to get withdrawn to see where it goes. So eventually, once they cash out of this, they can then send the money to various different burner wallets and then route this through a non-KYC exchange, which then they can swap it into Monero. And once you withdraw it to Monero, it's essentially, there's not really much you can do there. They could be using it in various dark web services, non-KYC exchanges as well, to turn into other more, common assets that are traceable, but it just makes it that much harder. And there's ways of, gift cards and things like that where you can cash out without actually giving any information of yourself. So something that I personally have not seen too much of, but is something we all need to be wary of, is decoys and framing methodologies. I think it's something to really look out for, because this is done in traditional finance in the real world. You want to frame someone because they'll take the blame rather than you. So I like to call these canary accounts, where someone who steals money, they'll just take a portion of it, like a decent portion, but not obviously all the money, and they'll send it to an account, that a wallet of someone who's either they have close contact with, or they can view, whether it be a high profile YouTuber, influencer, things like that. And if they're being investigated and things are getting tough for them, most likely you'll know, and they'll be like your canary. Their fear and knowledge of this and explaining that will kind of give the attacker knowledge that, okay, it's being looked into, I need to change what I'm doing, or add more obfuscation to what I'm doing. So also, after they launder the money, they can also send it back to these wallets to kind of double up on it, to make it seem like, oh, look, now they really are using this wallet because they sent even more money. But that could be furthest from the truth. And I really think this is something that's going to start happening more commonly. And I just hope that we're able to identify this before it happens. That way we don't wrongfully incriminate people. So how can we catch them? You know, how can we basically get them in trouble? How do the authorities find them? How do we do these things? So we have various different tools in our arsenal. Here's just an example of a few. This is not an endorsement by any means. These are just some tools that I personally have used or have come across, such as tracing tools, block explorers such as Etherscan, social media, which is actually, in my opinion, one of the best ways to catch someone, and open source intelligence search engines that assist with insider threat analysis. So firstly, I like to talk about Breadcrumbs, which is just one of many tracing tools. It has a nice UI, and I'll be showing it in a couple slides over. The founder made this because he himself was scammed in an ICO back in 2017, 2018. So it comes from like a cause that, you know, I think a lot of people who've been rug pulled or scammed can relate with. So it really helps identify, in my opinion, the proper transaction flows. It has a very nice interface that shows you the direction of the funds and color coordinated based on the amount, and you can actually draw on top of it. So you can create your own reports and output them. They also include risk compliance monitoring, and it's tapped into some legal authority like database as well too. So you can contact authorities if need be. This is an example of Breadcrumbs and the Luna Foundation Guard wallet, and you can trace, you know, see what money's going in, what money's going out. It'll show you, you know, the exchanges will have their own photos, and anyone who's using this can leave a note, a public conversation, and there'll be, you know, people will describe, hey, I found this. Can someone verify this, please? Is this actually what's happening? So those, you know, the more people that use these type of softwares, in my opinion, the more effective they become, because once you have more people looking at it, you can train people to truly understand what's going on, and B, the more eyes, the better. You know, not one person is going to be able to find everything. Some people view things completely differently. They might have some insider knowledge that others might not. So it's always good to have more people looking at this. Here's an example of one that I traced out not too long ago. There was a Uniswap phishing that was going on with one of the, I guess, high priority people in the Uniswap Discord, I believe. And this person was phished, and a lot of money was being sent out. And with this, you can see that it was being sent to Tornado.Cash, and all it deposited in 1 Ethereum increments, which means they're depositing into the 1 Ethereum Tornado.Cash interface that we saw before. And being able to see, you know, where it's being sent from, where it's receiving, and the amount, the currency. You can also trace not only just the gas of Ethereum, you can trace any ERC20 token on Ethereum, Polygon, some other chains do this. So here's an example of I think it's BiFi. It's a Bifrost protocol that was exploited, I believe, a month ago now. So you're able to, you know, draw directions and like the steps that were taken by these exploiters. So you can see like the way the money went. It went to Tornado.Cash. Router went to the 0.1 ETH depositing. And then I thought this one was particularly interesting. It kind of sparked me to look into more of the decoy and canary stuff, is because they sent money, some of it that was taken to a very public wallet that wasn't really trying to hide anything. So when I see stuff like that, it kind of leads me to believe it might be some sort of decoy methodology, but that is still an ongoing investigation, and there's no true idea of what may have fully happened. The postmortem is still being created, but it's always good to see these things in advance and learn from them. There's also a new tool that they added to it called Pathfinder. And essentially you just choose a certain address that you want to look really deeply into, and any associated addresses you want to see. Has this address ever touched Tornado.Cash? Has it ever touched Binance? Whatever. You can put it in. I redacted all like the wallet information because obviously we don't want to expose people's wallets. So just an example of what this will look like once you, hit go is it's kind of like a blurry photo, but essentially it just shows different transaction streams from, your destination wallet and all the different ones that you input. And you can see, how many different layers of obfuscation are there between these wallets. So moving forward, personally, one of my favorite ways to identify people is through social media and behavioral analysis. In my opinion, it's the easiest because although they might be technically savvy and be able to get away with these things on the blockchain, a lot of these people may want to gloat or show that they made all this money and even unintentionally explain this, whether it be in social media, in Discord, anything that you can interact with other people, especially Twitter. You know, a lot of people use Twitter incorrectly, in my opinion, and don't realize they can go back to them. So you can even look up wallet addresses and see, you can just search their wallet address in Twitter or whatever and see, okay, have they ever posted in some like free faucet thing and it's had to like put their address. So just kind of digging through different social medias and identifying maybe some wallets used, you might be able to obtain knowledge on who these people are and their real world identities. If not, just lead to another step that then you can find that out. So this leaves them susceptible to honeypot attacks, which kind of law enforcement and authorities can set these traps for them where it seems, in my opinion, they think that they're freely able to say something or they're able to deposit some money in there or exploit a system. And once they do, then people are able to identify who they are, and what happens from there is up to the authorities. So some of these social medias being like Twitter, which a lot of people coin crypto Twitter as its own subsection of Twitter that people talk about various different things and scams, NFTs, whatever. Discord's one of the biggest ones because it's not end-to-end encrypted, like Telegram or Signal. So in the event that something needs to be gathered from these Discord chats, it's very possible with like a subpoena or search warrant of some sort. So nothing is truly, encrypted or secure on Discord. And anyone who does use Discord when they're performing these actions is most likely going to slip up at some point. Telegram is also one that is used because of its encryption methodologies, but also because a lot of people from various countries interact with these protocols. They want to have a common place to interact that isn't necessarily WhatsApp. So Telegram is like the second best thing in their eyes. So here I can explain the various different kinds and types of DeFi crimes, and some that you may not even know of, or unwillingly you might be committing a crime potentially. So I think the most common one is the first, and it's the classic rug pull. We all know about the rug pull. It's like one of the most hackneyed terms in the entire space. But to break it down a little bit better, there's two types of rug pulls. There's a hard rug pull and a soft rug pull. Hard rug pull being the liquidity that is needed to actually trade the token and extract value from it is pulled by permission entities, whether it be the protocol owners or a malicious entity that was able to elevate privileges and somehow be able to interact with the contract in a permissioned manner. So once all this liquidity is gone, it's almost impossible to extract any value, thus making the tokens pretty much worthless. And this is a hard rug. So now we have a soft rug, which is a little bit, in my opinion, more malicious because it's kind of like the long con. So it's like a project will say they're doing something, or they'll have these long-term ideals, but then you just start noticing nothing's happening. You're not getting any updates. You're wondering why it's stagnant. And slowly, because of this kind of like status quo that's been adapted and these promises that aren't fulfilled, you have people slowly leaving and selling out. Thus, the value of the protocol keeps going down and down. And sometimes this is pretty devious, where they'll have community managers who aren't even fully aware of the situation, kind of maintaining the project and talking to these individuals like, oh no, yeah, I talked to the devs, like they're going to push these updates, this and that. But truthfully, most of the time, if it's abandoned, they're not coming back. And I think this is something that's happening a lot more now, because the past couple of years were the big DeFi boom, especially after the COVID lockdowns. And now a lot of these developers have either moved on, or if they have not, just straight up rug pulled, they are just caught up in other things and can't update their protocols. So a lot of people are in this situation now. One that I think a lot of people don't notice is the unexpected skimming. So, you might be using a protocol, you think it's working perfectly fine, you're getting the amount of money that you think you're supposed to be getting. But ultimately, if someone who has like permissioned abilities is taking little by little some money when they shouldn't be, whether it be they said they had a vesting schedule for their token and they weren't able to touch it until X amount of time, and they're just slowly taking some out. But most people are not going to look into that because they're so focused on, oh, hey, the project works, everything's good. So while it isn't directly malicious, in my opinion, to the end user initially, over time, it creates this weird situation where the protocol value just keeps going down and down. Everyone's wondering, why is this happening? And then eventually someone points out, wait, the treasury is just dumped. Like, what happened to all the money? And kind of things spiral down from there. And this is happening also more and more because these things can only go on for so long. There's only so much money that you can skim or take out of a protocol before it becomes very noticeable. So going on kind of the same soft rug theme is these false roadmaps. You'll have these projects that come out of nowhere and they'll be like, yeah, 2024, we're going to be taking over the entire NASDAQ. We're replacing them completely. Fiat's dead, all DeFi. But, you know, a lot of these times when they give you these crazy ideas and things, I don't want to name any specifically, but there's a lot of tokens that came out, I think, in the past couple of years that promised getting people rich. And that alone is kind of just a pretty obvious indicator that there's something wrong going on, because you can't just make everyone rich. And like I said at the beginning, it's a potential PvP free-for-all. To make money, you're taking someone else's money. It's not like a positive sum environment. It's mostly a zero sum environment. So it's really gamified, and you have to understand, to make a lot of money, someone is taking that loss. So a lot of times, yeah, these protocols will have these big roadmaps of big ideas, and then, you know, the first quarter that they have these ideas comes and they delay it out a quarter. And you're like, okay, maybe it's understandable. There's some development issues. Another quarter, they keep pushing it out and they keep providing reasons why it isn't coming. And over time, these things just either never come, or it just ends up being a soft rug, or just a flat out hard rug. So this is always something to look out for. And I think is also one of the more devious ones, because you're just getting people to trust you. And once you get people to trust you and you break that trust, they're less likely to ever want to use anything DeFi related or anything crypto related at all. And they're going to have this bad taste in their mouth. And that's kind of not what we want in this day and age. We want to actually promote people to come into the environment and promote security, that, hey, you're not just going to lose all your money by trusting someone. So that's obviously an ongoing struggle that we're trying to educate people on and make sure this doesn't keep happening. So another one is inaccurate returns. A lot of people, I think, initially see APR and APY, and although it's a pretty simple concept, some people initially don't understand it, but once they look into it, they're like, okay, I get it. APY is more exponential, APR is linear. A lot of protocols have various methods of using different oracles and different price feeds to identify what these APRs and APYs are based on your deposits. And they could be maliciously, hard coding these returns in where it could not actually be accurate. So what I personally recommend to prevent these type of things is always just run your own time tests, like check the APR that it says it has, and once you deposit, you spend like an hour and then extrapolate that out to 365 days and see if the numbers add up. And most of the time, there'll be slight deviations, which is fine. But when it's a large deviation, it might be that there's something more malicious going on that someone might not be aware of. And yeah, this is something that I think is seen a lot when people are offering insanely high APYs and APRs. It's actually not sustainable at all. In just economic theory, it's not sustainable, let alone you're not just creating something in DeFi that just defeats the odds of fiat money and everything. Here's one that I think is kind of relevant and more recently has been done. You could replicate someone's transaction who did something malicious, even though you may not be the initial person who did it, by just participating in these and knowing willingly that you're, stealing money is still a crime. No matter how much you think you're separated from it, you're still committing a crime by doing it. It's like watching a bank robber rob a bank and you just start taking money too. Like, yeah, maybe you didn't initially start that, but you're still taking money. So you're still an accomplice. You're still a criminal in the eyes of the law. So this is an example of something that was in August, beginning of the month. People were replicating transactions that were stealing money, and all you had to do was kind of take part of the like data and just change it to your wallet address, and then the money would be sent to you. So a lot of people were doing that, and money was just being taken and taken. So a lot of those people, without realizing it, are actually accomplices. So we also have inaccurate returns. Continued. This would be more of like recent situations where allegations were made against platforms such as Celsius, Voyager, where they promised these fixed yields over a long period of time, and the way that they were generating money allegedly wasn't adding up. And currently, there are ongoing bankruptcy situations and investigations of all degrees. But allegedly what happened is they went insolvent. They couldn't truly pay up the money when there was a bank run. And this is obviously in my opinion, one of the more dangerous things to happen, because it's one thing to have your money get stolen, but for it to just kind of be locked in this perpetuity forever. And then the company goes bankrupt or something, and you just never get the money. It just goes into this, vanishes in thin air. This is why everyone says it's not your keys, not your crypto. We always promote hardware wallets and self-custodying your own crypto. So things like this don't happen. And another thing, from my personal experience, don't lock your money into anything. Locking is not a good idea. Like, it's just, come on, don't lock your stuff. So who should we report these crimes to? I know there's different various entities around the globe, and they all kind of work with each other. I'm mainly talking about the US authorities because I have personal experience and knowing of them, but I know Canadian government also works with US law enforcement as well in these situations, because they span across the entire globe. So you have all different countries working together. So we have the SEC, the CFTC, FBI, the IRS, Criminal Investigations Unit, and the Department of Justice and anti-money laundering agencies. So first, talk about the SEC. We all kind of know Gary Gensler. He's the SEC chair. He's pretty well known for giving these MIT classes on blockchain technology and fintech. You can still see those on YouTube online. They're open source and free to watch. He recently took over, I want to say a couple of years ago, and the SEC regulates securities and any sort of exchanges. So securities in the traditional sense would be like stocks like Apple, Amazon, Google, these big companies where you're buying a share of their organization, and you're looking at their financials, and their success kind of is supposed to reflect on you. It's an investment contract. They're promising you future returns. And because of this, they're held to this higher standard. Crypto is not inherently seen as that by a lot of people, but the SEC is in current ongoing litigation with quite a few different projects to identify, are they security, are they not? And I think these are pretty landmark cases that are going to be decided upon relatively soon. So we have the CFTC, which would be the Commodity Futures and Trading Commission. This would be any sort of like leverage trading, futures, synthetic assets, just trading gold, copper, silver, lumber, beef, anything that's not really like tangible is more of a commodity. Virtually being traded is most likely being regulated by the CFTC. They kind of have like a weird divide between the SEC, where they are trying to figure out who truly has authority over what, but ultimately they're both working together to regulate these things. So then you have the FBI. Everyone knows the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. They're not only just spying on people or whatever people think they're doing. They're just doing general federal investigations into like businesses and crimes that are being done across, not even just in the US specifically, but even globally, reaching out and working with like the CIA and other law enforcement agencies globally. They have probably the farthest reaching as far as their resources. They typically kind of have like a far reach with the SEC, because SEC has global jurisdiction through a bunch of different kind of laws and regulations that were passed decades ago. So the FBI is more of like, I want to say, the silver hand that kind of lays down the law when it needs to, but the SEC and FBI work together. So then you have the IRS-CI. Everyone views them as like the tax guys, like they just want your money, your taxes, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, sure, you need to pay your taxes, but they also have a criminal investigations unit, and they're actually very well trained. to identify money laundering, tax evasion, any sort of organized crime, hiding money and not paying taxes on it. So they work with like Homeland Security, FBI, anything you can imagine. So yeah, they're not just looking for your tax money. And fun fact, you can actually report taxes on like illegal money. So that's a pretty interesting thing. I'm not sure if that's really done with crypto assets yet, but we may see more and more of that, especially with this Tornado.Cash sanctioning stuff. It'll create kind of some interesting situations within the country. And lastly, we have, just the Department of Justice and all sorts of anti-money laundering agencies, kind of just all jumbled together, and they're working together to, prevent money laundering. And funding of these terrorist organizations. I think it's very pertinent that we do incentivize these things, and there has been really good like strides being made to incentivize people to kind of whistleblow and like, hey, like I know this is going on, and I can point you to the person who I think is doing this crime. Kind of sounds like snitching, but in reality, it's more of you're just protecting people. And especially when it comes to crypto, I think one of the crypto purist ideologies is like code is law. And yeah, sure, you might believe code is law, but if someone gets caught, that means they didn't obey that themselves. Like they got caught from their own actions. It's not necessarily that someone like went out of their way to find them. If they're getting caught, you can still apply to the whole code is law ideology. So in my opinion, I think reporting these crimes is, you're just doing a civil service. You're doing a good, because for all you know, it could have been someone who put their life savings into these type of things, and now they need to feed their family, whatever it is. These things can be devastating, and you want to make sure these don't happen. And I personally am very passionate about that. Personally, I've been a victim of lots of like rug pulls and whatnot. That just comes with the territory of the work. You kind of have to figure these things out and experience it to truly understand the emotional impact that comes with it. And you don't want to mess with people's money. Like there's a lot of things that you don't want to mess with, but especially you don't want to mess with people's money. Not in this day and age, especially. But there's lots of incentive programs that I'll go into in a little bit. But yeah, with whistleblowing, just giving information over to these agencies. There's a lot of anonymous ways of reporting this. The Dodd-Frank Act, that's mainly like the SEC and CFTC, along with other agencies. Congress passed this to really heavily boost the amount of money that can be given out to these whistleblowers. If you go on like these websites, you can see some of these whistleblowers getting paid out 30 million. Like their life is set off just like reporting one of these things. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, that sounds kind of nice. And honestly, it makes sense. It should be. If you're able to identify billions of dollars being stolen from people, like, and you just get a big cut of it, like you just saved a lot of money and you got a big payout out of it. And I think it should incentivize a lot of people to be more vigilant with this and look into this a lot more. IRS also has a whistleblowing program. It only pays on the amount that's evaded in taxes though. So it's not necessarily just the amount that's seized, but you can actually stack these on top of each other like Legos, and you can just get a ridiculous payout. So I think we're about to see a lot more people just getting rich overnight from reporting these crimes, and hey, I'm all for it. So if you're someone who wants to do this, get an attorney. Once you look into it, you won't actually get paid if you're doing it as an individual. You need a representation. So you need an attorney or someone who has experience in this field. And especially if you want to stay anonymous, because you're dealing with these large crime syndicates, you might be worried about, your family or your personal life. You don't want to endanger them. So you want to go through as many anonymous channels as possible without exposing your loved ones or any of your friends to any danger. So definitely get an attorney if you plan on doing this. And it is the right thing to do. Like, as I said, if you're a crypto purist who believes in code is law, understand that them being caught is just, they let themselves get caught. You don't get caught by like someone else exposing you. There is ways, sadly, there are ways to get away with it. And there are tons of people who've gone away with it. That's just statistically speaking, it happens. And, we're not going to be able to catch all of them, but, we want to catch as many as we can. And having the cooperation of everyone in the community and the industries alike, traditional finance and decentralized finance coming together, I think we'll be able to do a lot of good for the community and make DeFi safe for everyone and make them want to actually participate without worrying about $500 million getting stolen from a bridge one day, or some other thing happening. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that, and I'll open the floor up for a Q&A, but I appreciate you all for listening. So I'm open to any questions, whether it be, I guess, you want to type it out or even just say it. I'm open to anything.
Well, thank you very much, Ryon, for the wonderful presentation. Such a fascinating presentation. I think this is important because in the crypto and blockchain space, many times we hear those evangelical discourses about blockchain and crypto, and people say blockchain and crypto are going to save the world. But now I think by listening to Ryon's presentation, we know that there's a dark side to the blockchain space. So thank you very much for bringing this issue to the light. Yeah, so now it's the time for Q&A. Anyone has questions? Please raise your hand or just type a question in the chat. Yeah, Scott.
Oh, hi, Ryan. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to about the role of government agencies, because it seems to me like in the DeFi space that when things are going really well, people want it to be more decentralized. But then when things go bad, people want governments to come in and kind of bail them out. And it just seems to me a little bit awkward that way.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. It's kind of this weird intersection where, as you're saying, things are going great. Hey, we don't need regulation, whatever. But then things start going really bad and people lose their money. Once they're personally affected, they're like, actually, wait, no, I want regulation. I want my money back. And it's just this emotional reaction people have. And I think a lot of people view the government and law enforcement agencies as kind of like this all bad thing. Whereas I don't think it should be viewed like that. Even from a very crypto purist and like privacy retentive standpoint, you can still work well with regulation. It's just a matter of what regulation there is. Regulating doesn't necessarily mean everything needs to be locked down and completely controlled by the government. It just basically just adds basic checks to things to ensure you're not giving money to people who shouldn't. Like, do you really want to give money to millions of dollars to someone who's like a serial killer? Probably not. If you knew that, you probably wouldn't give them money. And I think that's the type of stuff that, in my opinion, should be regulated. Is like, if you like willingly are giving money to someone who's a criminal, like there needs to be ways to identify this. And yes, it kind of ruins the privacy to an extent, but no one is ever going to adopt something that just promotes crime. As much as we'd love to believe that like everything's going to be decentralized, there's going to be no government, it's just, if that does happen, it's not in our lifetimes. And I truly would be surprised if it does happen at all. Just human nature themselves, people always want to have some sort of control over something, whether it be their own life, things they do in their day-to-day, or if you want to look at it from like a conspiracy standpoint, like people in power want to control other things. So I don't think it's truly ever going to get to this whole pure decentralized model. And if anything, I think pure decentralization right now never works. It's a lot of these projects that say they're decentralized are just, they have admin privileges, essentially. They use proxies and they can change anything at any moment. So it's a false sense of decentralization in reality. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And so, Ron, I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
So I can see why government organizations will be interested in blockchain forensics because they want to protect the citizens' financial assets, protect the security of the society, and so on. But I'm wondering who will be the private organizations that are interested in blockchain forensics? Or in other words, how would these private organizations be rewarded for doing blockchain forensics?
Right. So I think that's definitely something that I personally have been trying to push for. Is there's a lack of, I think, incentive to do forensics. I think you're more incentivized to actually be a criminal, sadly. And that's just the reality of it. But there's more and more tracing tools coming up. And I personally like to just do forensics in my free time. Like whether if I don't find anything or do find something, I'm always curious looking at block explorers, like, okay, that's a really large transaction. Like what's going on here? And you just always trace it back. And I think there's a story in every single like transaction like trace. And if at the very least, if you don't want to do it to like get this prize by reporting it to a government agency and retrieving money, I think we can have more of these like private forensics firms, people that can be hired to do these forensics, because right now it's kind of very isolated into like law enforcement is perhaps some of the only people that have all the tools necessary to do this. But there's a lot of vigilantes, if you will, in the community that are more than willing to do this. Finds them, they're very fascinated in this. And I know a lot of people that, you know, once I tell them about this or show them that this is really cool. And I personally think it's really cool too. It's like, even if you don't want to actually work for, you know, the government or anything, it's kind of like you're just a little detective, and no one is telling you what you can or can't do. And you might just uncover something that saves a bunch of people's money and potentially even their lives. As cheesy as that sounds, it's just the reality of it. So I think a lot of private organizations based on forensics and creating these data analytics tools and tracing, there's more coming, but I think we still need a lot and a lot more. We have a lot of like auditing firms and things like that, but that's just more so like code review. Not too many have the budget nor are big enough yet to branch out into building tools and things like that. But I think that's the direction we're heading into. And especially with on-chain monitoring, especially large wallets that, you know, might be of concern, we just put their addresses in and we can monitor and get alerts anytime some transactions that might be deemed as suspicious are done. So yeah, I definitely think if someone doesn't do it, I'll come up with something eventually that'll incentivize people to do forensics, because I think it's really cool personally. But yeah, currently it is kind of mainly just law enforcement that's truly has the tools to do this.
So if you look at some of the layer one protocols these days, most of the things that they do are trying to expand the ecosystem, right? So they are trying to get as much as adoption possible. And I think during that process, it's basically inevitable that some malicious actors would join the ecosystem. But I guess for long-term healthy development of the ecosystem, maybe some of the layer one blockchain protocols should consider doing some of the forensics by themselves to keep the bad actors out of the ecosystem, so that in the longer run, the ecosystem can be healthy and the protocol can be used by many people for good.
Yeah, I definitely think that a lot of security personnel at layer one foundations and things can be trained to do at the very least like some sort of forensics, especially if you're handing out grants or incentive programs. If you're not KYCing them, at the very least you want to monitor these wallets and make sure there's no like sketchy history. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to necessarily what I've done or haven't done at Celo, but even on other blockchains and stuff, I've looked into some of these grant recipients, and it's just questionable at times. So just all takes that extra step of understanding what's truly going on.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Ryan, I have a quick question, if I could.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. Really, really insightful. A lot of new stuff here. I'm wondering, like, how did you get into forensics? What kind of tools? Like, how did you learn these tools? And like, how did you like break into the industry, I guess? And also, do you have any like favorite investigators, analysts you follow, like Zach XBT or someone? Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I think it's a mixture of just like time in the space. So initially I knew nothing, as most people wouldn't know anything when they first come in. And just over time interacting with protocols, I slowly started realizing, hey, like, how can I interact with these contracts without a front end? And then you start looking at block explorers, you start seeing how you can interact with those, you can start reading the code. I started learning a little bit of Solidity myself, just like automate a few things. So it's just like years and years of just accumulating interest. But what really kind of tipped me off to, I'd say, the exponential growth of understanding truly how to do forensics is I personally, like, someone kind of like ticked me off. So I was just like looking into like the protocol itself to see, I wanted to see what was going on, because my money was like stuck and I was kind of mad, as most people would be. So I looked into it deeper and deeper, and I just started noticing some really interesting things that I was finding. And slowly but surely, I just started becoming more obsessive about it and looking into a bunch of different things that before I'm like, hey, if I could find this with this one, what's going to stop me from finding something on a different chain or on a different protocol? And it's truly something where you start looking into it, and it's like you taste the poison, you taste the Kool-Aid, you can't go back. Just so interesting seeing all these things, and you can trace it back to like an individual person if you wanted. Not suggesting that like doxing people or anything, but it just shows how easy it is to truly identify criminals. And I'm sure if the government had more manpower, they would be able to identify all these, but it needs people like us. And I know you mentioned Zach. I personally don't like follow him or anything. I don't think it's bad that he's like a big figure. I think it's kind of good that he's promoting people to do their own investigations. I, at the same time, don't think it should really be sensationalized. I think it should just be more of a good Samaritan type thing. Like, no one should be doing it just to get fame or money. It's mainly you have to be passionate about it. And I think, as with anything, there's always, like great developers who end up being black hats because they realize there's more money in that. Likewise, there could be people who are really good investigators end up being criminals. And I think it's all about your motive. And if you truly are passionate about it, you're not going to end up on this quote unquote dark side. So yeah, I don't personally follow any investigators besides myself. But I mean, I'm obviously not like the best out there or anything, but I like to keep an open mind. And if I do see like a new tool, like the other day, there's a tool called Impersonator.xyz, and you can actually impersonate a wallet address. And it's an interesting tool, but I'm always learning something new. And I think that's what's really outstanding to me, is just how extravagant like the community is. They'll come up with just different stuff day after day after day that I'm like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even know that was possible. So there's always someone smarter out there. There's always someone who's better. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just gives us more opportunities to learn. So I think it's just being open-minded and being a constant student of the field, if you will. That is what really draws me into it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I see that we are on top of the hour. Any other questions? Quick questions? Okay, if not, then we will say thank you again to Ryon. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. And this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to Blockchain UBC's website and LinkedIn account. So if you want to review the content, please visit Blockchain UBC's website and LinkedIn. And we look forward to seeing you again next month in September.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening in. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ryon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.